What's up YouTube? My name's Ravlar and today I'm going to be discussing quite a contentious topic. I'm going to be exploring everything Jagex and MTX related. But firstly, before we get into it, I just want to leave a disclaimer here and discuss a few things really quickly. The first thing is, everything I say comes from a place of love. I want Runescape 3 to be great, I want Jagex to do fantastically well, and I want to be proud of this game I've spent so much time on. If that means being critical, hopefully they will take it on board and they won't see it as an insult. Secondly, it's important to note that Jagex is a for-profit business. They aren't a charity, they aren't a government institution. And finally, everything I reference will be listed below so you can go and look at it yourselves. Now, over the past few months, there has been a lot of attention on Jagex and how they handle microtransactions. Whilst the Runescape player base have been vocally against microtransactions for a number of years, this became mainstream media when Jagex were invited to Parliament to discuss how they deal with microtransactions and how they could potentially be damaging to individuals. So on April the 2nd, a couple of Jagex representatives went down to Parliament to discuss how their microtransaction model worked. The parliamentary inquiry was focused on immersive and addictive technologies, of which Jagex's current microtransaction model falls under because it is a form of gambling. If you want to watch the full inquiry, I have left a link down below. It is very interesting and Jagex does come up with some questionable claims like RuneScape isn't addictive and they aren't encouraging gambling. A couple of months later, the government released a report on immersive and addictive technologies, and in this report they specifically mentioned RuneScape in relation to the financial harms of potential immersive technology. They discuss a case study of how an individual managed to rack up £50,000 of debt, and they discuss how Jagex deals with microtransactions in general. Overall, it paints Jagex in a very bad light, and this is what got the attention of the mainstream media. Now, it's important to note that the rest of the report talks about potential legislation which could reduce the harmfulness of these sort of technologies, and that is very important to bear in mind for what we're going to talk about later on in this video. Now, after this report, mainstream YouTubers and mainstream media got a hold of this story and started publishing articles on Jagex and their questionable MTX morals. The articles explored how the backlash from the community was simply being ignored, and Reddit went into meltdown with MTX memes and just people being angry at Jagex for how they were dealing with the situation. Now you would think after being in the public eye, after all this criticism, after all this unwanted attention, Jagex would have toned down MTX and made a statement in regarding the future of the game. No, instead they've actually done the absolute opposite, and MTX is now more potent than ever. Some of the strongest microtransactional promos have come out recently, and my friend Micro discusses this very well in his recent video. It's unbelievable that after all this, the intensity of microtransactions has increased massively, and instead of addressing it, Jagex have kept quiet up to now, which is sadly not good enough. But anyway, why is this happening? What is going on, and is this endangering the future of our game? Well, we're going to find out in this video. So the first thing we're going to look at is how Jagex are doing as a company, and in particular how RuneScape 3 is doing. Now, what I'm going to be referencing throughout this section is the financial statements which could be found at this website. Feel free to have a browse at your leisure. Now, in the last couple of months, Jagex have finished their financial statements for the year ending 2018, so we can analyze how the company has done, and in particular focus on RuneScape 3. Now, as the numbers show, there has been a 9.3% rise in revenue since 2017 to 2018, and profits have also increased by around 4%. In a statement, the Jagex CEO Mod Pip stated that this is the 4th year of consecutive growth for RuneScape and that they are delighted. Now, Jagex don't officially report the separate revenues of old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3, but they do mention it in their strategic report, and this is very important information which we're going to touch on right now. So what we can derive from this is that even though Jagex has grown itself, RuneScape 3 has actually declined by £5 million in profit, and the growth in revenue and profits of Jagex as a whole is purely driven by the substantial growth that Old School has seen because of the launch of mobile. Now, what's particularly interesting about this is the reasoning that Jagex gives for RuneScape 3's decline. Now, according to this report, this decline is because Jagex rebalanced microtransactions to increase good player sentiment and increase player longevity. Just take a moment and let that reasoning sink in. Now, further on in the report, they report their microtransaction numbers, and as you can see, there is a significant decrease in the amount of microtransactions revenue they've got in 2018 compared to 2017. The subscription revenue has gone up because of old school mobile, but microtransactions have fallen quite a lot. Now, is this because Jagex really did change things up in 2018? Did they actually rebalance Treasure Hunter so it was more sustainable? The answer is sadly, of course, no. A big fat no, and this is a complete and blatant lie, and I can prove it. So here we have a list of all the Treasure Hunter promotions in 2017 and 2018. If you compare them side by side, they're surprisingly similar, and to be honest, 2018 has had absolutely no reduction to this whatsoever, and this is just proof that whatever they said in the report is complete rubbish. Feel free to have a look yourselves. I will of course leave these links in the description below. So it's clear that the reduction in microtransactions has not been a constant effort from Jagex to make the game more sustainable, but instead they simply haven't been able to sell as much MTX as they wanted to in 2018. So why was this? Well, there is arguably a simple explanation, and that is lower player count. Lower player count means less members to buy microtransactions, and overall you sell less. Now, I found this graph on a Reddit post by Dreadmal, who actually highlights how RuneScape's average population has declined over the years. As you can see, there is a steady decline over the past few years. Now, if we want to say that the decline in MTX is simply because a decline in players over the years, well, that should stay true for the years 2016 to 2017 as well. However, in this period, microtransaction fees surprisingly went up despite a declining player base. The same pattern can be found between the years of 2015 and 2016 as well. So whilst I'm sure a declining player base does lead to less MTX, it leads me to believe that these few examples prove that there are other factors which have led to less MTX revenue for Jagex in the last financial year. Now, I personally think that this is down to a number of factors. First of all, as time goes on, people reach endgame, and as a result, microtransactions just simply have less value to them. Because microtransactions were so powerful, they bought their microtransactions and were able to reach their goals. And as a result, they don't need them anymore, so they've stopped spending. Additionally, I think the vast amount of double experience weekends that RuneScape 3 has, not to mention all the bonus Easter weekends and the Christmas weekends and Hanukkah weekends, whatever, has led to people just reaching endgame and meeting their goals. And similarly to the previous explanation, as a result, they just don't need microtransactions anymore. Now, my next explanation is simply the lack of content. For the past couple of years, the amount of content that RS3 has got is pretty pathetic, and, I think JMods should hold their hands up to that. Because there's not much content to enjoy, people feel less motivated to spin to win to actually access that content, and as a result, microtransactions are less valuable to them. Now, of course, these are just my theories. You are of course welcome to disagree and provide your own. I would love to read them in the comments down below. But regardless, what we do know for sure is that despite Jagex promoting MTX, their revenue has gone down, and I'm sure that this is worrying a few people at the head of the game. So this leads on quite nicely to the next section. Why has there been such an increase in the potency of microtransactions recently, despite all the shit that Jagex is getting, and why haven't they addressed it? What the fuck is going on, basically? Well, my first theory is explained by the declining MTX revenue. Now, it's quite straightforward to understand this. Because microtransactions aren't getting the traction that Jagex wants, they're simply increasing how powerful they are. And they really have increased how powerful they are. Trust me, check out Micro's video if you want to know more. Now, obviously, the stronger the microtransaction is, the more likely people are to buy it. So even in this saturated RuneScape 3 market, people will see a good offer and simply think it's too good to miss out on, so they will just purchase it. As a result, at least in the short term, Jagex's microtransaction revenue will go up, and they can report better numbers next time round. Now, my second explanation is a slightly out-of-the-box theory. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Jagex were called to Parliament. They have government looking at every move they're making. They have been identified as a source of gambling and microtransactions, and this is heavily being monitored. Now, in the report earlier, I said they provide potential solutions for how these sorts of things can be managed and maintained ethically. As a result, a lot of the suggestions are new legislation, which will result in Jagex reworking everything they have to do with microtransactions. Their current loot box treasure hunter system will simply not fit the bill, and as a result, everything will be scrapped and changed, and because of this, they're simply wanting to cash out right now. So it's quite clear that there will be heavy legislation around this area in the future, and Jagex will be restricted in what they can and can't do when it comes to microtransactions. So, as a result, they have something good going for them now in the MTX model. They are trying to exploit it as much as they can before this new legislation comes in. And trust me, this new legislation will come in. Now, in reality, it's probably a mixture of both of this reasoning, and I really want to hear what you guys have to think of it down below. So, at the beginning of this video, I said, Jagex is a financial institution. They have every right to profit maximize. It is their goal. So why do we have a problem with it? Well, I want Jagex to be around for many, many years. And I personally think the way that they are milking the RS3 game, it is completely unsustainable, unhealthy, and disgraceful to the players who've worked hard to get where they are. How much more can they milk the population? How much more microtransactions can they sell before the game simply stops becoming profitable, before the player bases loses all faith in the video game maker and just move on? I'm personally all for Jagex to make money and as much of it as they can, but microtransactions need to be looked at. They need to be sustainable and they need to be invested in the game so it attracts new players. The microtransaction model can't go on forever, and that is the truth. And you know it, and I know it, and they know it. But because Jagex is putting a short-term gain above the longevity of the game and the longevity of their own business, this is why we're upset. This is why we're angry. So JMods, if you do listen and watch this, please rethink your strategy. You're harming the game. You may not mean to, and that is all.